One of the chief investor concerns the chief concerns investors have had on Altria this past year is just what impact an e-cigarette like Juul, with its popularity, could have on the volumes for the cigarette category. And as you see some of the declines accelerating, there's more and more concern about some of the long-term outlook. Altria has an enormous amount of flexibility in how it hits its EPS targets, and it's done that very successfully in the past. But people worry a little bit about how that mix might shift and what the quality of it could be. So if they join forces with somebody like Juul and have an ability to participate in that shift on the other side of it as well, it's a bit of a hedge for Altria.
Is there a thinking that e-cigarettes are leading to a decline in smokers? I mean, is it viewed as a hedge in that way, that there's decline in the use of the core product, and so therefore it's got to have a hedge in e-cigarettes?
What we've seen at the moment is the earlier stages of an evolution where the FDA's strategic vision, if it were to play out, is to take the nicotine and the flavors in combustible cigarettes and transfer them to non-combustible alternatives and bring the smoking consumer along with them. And so obviously their hope is that there's not new consumers that enter at the same time, but that is what the smoker cares about, is the nicotine and the taste. And if you can provide those in an alternative form that's non-combustible, there is a public health benefit that is potentially fairly significant. The concern that the FDA has had, and Gottlieb has been quite vocal about, is attracting new users, particularly underage. And so this is where regulatory competence at Altria is a potential benefit to Juul, because they've worked with the FDA for a very long time. They have a very good relationship there. This is something newer to Juul that they don't stand out in that way for. The FDA's been quite vocal in its criticism of Juul. If they could combine to successfully transfer smokers to these non-combustible alternatives and keep the underage users out of the equation, it would be a win for everybody.
Analyst community pretty positive on this potential minority stake. At what cost, though? I mean, if you take a look at what Juul was valued at the end of the summer, up to $15 billion. If Altria takes up to a 40% stake of $15 billion, I assume that Juul would be worth less than 16 right now. And then you put it in context with what Altria had paid for, let's say, UST in the past, which was, what, $11+ billion, and it got the entire company. I mean, at what cost do you want to see a deal get done at?
We obviously don't know anything about what negotiations are going on, if there are in fact any, and what a deal might look like. But I think there's a few considerations. Altria does take a long view. If this is considered a competitive threat to them and to perception, importantly, because it's not really the EPS that's at risk as much as the quality of it and the multiple that gets applied. There's a lot of ways to understand this as a benefit for them, that they're not price insensitive, but they do have a lot of flexibility there.
If they are looking at the decline of their core product, do you think they should be looking harder at cannabis?
Well, at the moment, the problem with cannabis is that it's still federally illegal.
Sure.
And so I think that there's no question they're at least standing on the sidelines paying attention. How and when they may get involved, I think entirely depends on what the U.S. law is and how that may evolve. But I think there's also an analogy in some of the e-cigarette space of several years ago, where there were lots of players. They participated after some of the dust started to settle. They've got different ways they could still continue to get more involved, obviously, if this Juul deal happens. They don't need to be the first one in, I don't think, if something changes, because there's still a lot of ways that the category could and would evolve.